Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Blakely Skincare. I'm Jasmine and I am here basically as a DIY enthusiast. I'm self-taught. I really just had a knack for making skincare and just kind of delved deep into it. I had a really successful business run selling the products, and I'm here to share my knowledge with you. So today we're going to be making the glazed gingerbread whipped body glaze. And basically a whipped body glaze is just fancy for a body butter. Now you can pause to read my footnotes here. These just tell you about each phase, what they incorporate. Definitely pause to read that disclaimer, and then links to purchase supplies and equipment are in the description. So this is our first phase, which is phase A. Usually with body butters, you want to be melting down the ingredients. This is going to be a mixture of cocoa butter and shea butter. You can use yellow. I advise white if you're going to be wanting a specific color outside of just brown. And then I have a little bit of cetyl alcohol here, and this is just to help thicken it and give it a really nice, dense, like thick consistency that's really creamy without being like too waxy. And then so we're going to be melting that down. As you can just see there, we melted down the ingredients thoroughly all the way until they are complete liquid. It's okay if you have like maybe an extra, like a small chunk of butter, because you can just stir it in and it will disappear. And we're going to be chilling that. I'm going to be chilling it in the freezer. You guys can also let it set aside for at least 24 hours. It's completely up to you. And then here we're just prepping the next phase. And this is the fragrance that I added into the safflower oil, and this is the mica. So I can incorporate it without making like a lot of big splashy mess like I've done in some of my past videos. This time, this method I'm doing is where I'm going to add the mica, the colorant, to the oil with the fragrance, so that way I can just add it all in nicely at the end of the video. So essentially with body butters, you have to let them set aside for several hours, okay? So we're just prepping in the meantime. And as you can see, I'm just going to stir here up until it's completely melted. Sorry, not melted, but dissolved into all the chunks and lumps are out into the oil, because it's, I want to say oil soluble, because it'll, kind of a little bit solubilize in the oil, but not really, it'll separate. And this is what it should look like when you're done doing that. So for body butters, one key thing that people always say is, oh, well, I let it set aside for several hours and it's not thickening up. This is what it should look like when it's thickened up as much as it's going to go without the added oil. Okay, you notice that I didn't put the safflower oil in yet. And so I did an accelerated rate. It also depends on the batch, okay? If you have a very large batch, probably much bigger than this, the bigger the batch, the longer it's going to take to set. Typically 48 hours, or no, sorry, 24 hours is the magic number, but sometimes it can take 48 hours. It just depends on, like, if you're making a big batch, like 64 ounces or anything bigger than that, it can typically take more than 12 or 24 hours at room temperature. And it also depends on where you're at too. If you're in warmer climates, it may or may not solidify depending on your ratios. Depending on where you're at in those ratios, you're going to want to have more of a 60-40 type of mixture here with more butters and oils. And it's going to be a little bit thicker, but these butters are designed to melt on contact with the skin. So with that being said, they are highly prone to melting. And that's just kind of the nature of body butters, guys. Unless you're emulsifying them, I apologize for that, because I had the biggest headache trying to ship these. And what I'm doing is just kind of scraping everything down from the sides, because as it got firm, some of it stuck to the side. But a lot of people say their body butters aren't firming up. They think that they ruin them because they're too liquidy. All body butters, no matter what kind it is, even if you freeze it, I still say let it settle for at least an hour. This time I froze it and it worked fine, but even sometimes it takes much longer than that. And you just kind of have to check it and play by ear when you're making it. So with this method, as you can see, I'm whipping it to get all the lumps out and to start getting it more incorporated and ready to add in the colorant. As you guys can see, it's kind of hard to see on the camera, but there's the colorant, the mica mixed with the oil and the fragrance. And I'm slowly adding it in because it is going to get significantly more liquidy. And you guys can see here that initially it's absorbing it. It doesn't look like it's too watery. I apologize. I tried to get the mixer um, and not so much in the shot as much as it is so you guys can see me mixing the butter. But um, essentially, I'm just slowly adding it in. You could add it in all at once. It's just going to get extra liquidy. And even then, I promise you still didn't mess it up. If you just left it like this without adding any more oil, it would get really hard, like rock solid. You know the way that when you first get that cocoa butter, how it's hard and you have to cut it? That's about how hard it would get. Because these butters solidify and they settle after a certain amount of time has been in there. But because of the way that they solidify and settle, it can maintain this nice whipped texture and the air bubbles, and it won't deflate like some other products do. So the thicker you have it, the better it'll hold its fluff. And vice versa, if you have it more liquidy, it won't hold the air bubbles as well, but it'll melt in nicer. So I don't want to say nicer, but it'll melt much easier, and it's a lot harder to ship. So a thicker butter with more hard waxes and hard butters will be better in terms of not melting as easily. And so I'm just adding in more and more here. As you guys can see, as I'm going, I'm getting everything down from the sides. And you guys can notice the bowl that I have here. Body butters do expand. So when you're adding in the air from whipping it and you're adding in the oil, you're going to get a significantly increased volume. So if it does ship and it ends up shrinking, that is normal because once it liquefies, it no longer can hold the air in it. So that's whenever you'll see that effect taking place. But it's going to solidify pretty nicely, even though it's going to look very liquidy. And I always say body butters take at least 12 to 24 hours or overnight to make, because I want you guys to know ahead of time, you need lots of patience to make body butters. They just require that type of waiting period. So just kind of know that you're not going to get immediate results. That's just how it is. Even with freezing, still always wait till the next day to see how they set up, so you know for sure what that final texture of your product is going to be like. And one thing also to note about butters, you can market them however you want, right? They usually if you make a butter with oils that are quicker to absorb in the skin, then it won't feel so greasy on the skin. But even with that being the case, inherently, body butters are a mixture of solid oils and hard oils, hard oils, solid oils, and soft oils or liquid oils. So what that means is that this is going to be inherently oily / greasy. So you need to know that for marketing purposes, just to let people know what it is and what they're most likely going to get, because some people are surprised because they think like a lot of body butters are, in my opinion, they're not, I don't want to say falsely, but they're compared to lotions when they really shouldn't be, because they aren't lotions. They don't compare to it. They don't have the feelings, which is why people get confused by it. It's not the same thing. And you see, guys, it looks significantly runny here. And here back in the day when I first did this, I would normally think that I messed it all up. I added too much oil, and then I would just leave it sitting out and then come back to it the next day, and it would be so much harder. It's kind of weird how that works, but you guys will see towards the end what it ends up looking like. But anyways, these aren't really to be compared to lotions because it's a totally different experience. These are more for like if you like the glazed, glossy, oily, shiny, shimmery type of look on your skin. That's what body butters are for, as to where lotions more so absorb and hydrate the skin internally quicker than a lotion body butter will, because body butters kind of sit on top and they take a little bit more time to absorb. And even when they absorb, they're not really giving you hydration. They're giving you the oils, which is just a different effect on the body. Water and oils are very different. They have different effects on the body. So just remember that when you're marketing them, just so that people aren't confused and you give your customers the best experience they can have, you want to make sure that you are very clear about the distinction between the two. One isn't better than the other. They are just different products. when it comes to lotions and body butters. And then so here I let it set for those 24 hours, and I kind of went between like I had to what I ended up having to do is, as you can see here, when I start whipping it, it stays kind of chunky. And that's because the bowl that I'm using is just too wide and broad, and there's too much butter sitting in this bowl specifically because the size increased. So what I have to do is take it out, and I actually put it in one of my beakers, and I put a little bit at a time and whipped it, and it really took out all of the lumps and chunks that you guys are going to see here in a minute. See how it's really thick and chunky? Even though I wanted it to thicken up, that was the desired outcome, I had to take it out into a smaller cup and whip it so that it could get like this. And I'm going to do a little bit of texture play just to show you guys. There shouldn't be any lumps whenever you are making your butters. Okay, that's very important because otherwise it can come off as gritty. Also, it's best to use micas. I mean, you could use tea powders and things like that, but the colors just really aren't as stable. And sometimes the powders aren't ground finely enough just because of what it might be. Like certain leaves and certain types of powders just don't grind as finely as mica does. So it doesn't blend in as nice, and it kind of leaves a gritty feeling. I've learned this the hard way myself. But you want a nice smooth texture, and this is a texture that it's going to stay. Even after it's settled, this is what it's like, and it just has this very rich, creamy, but not too dense type of feeling. With the butters that I used, between being cocoa and shea butter, it is going to be something that some customers may consider to be a little bit more on the greasy side sometimes. It leaves the skin super soft, but you can switch out the cocoa butter for kokum and it won't be as greasy. It'll be lightweight. And so here's the glaze that you guys are going to see me pouring in my videos. I like to use castor oil. And then I add in a little bit of mica, so it's kind of thick, okay? And you want to add in enough mica to where it's you can see that it's a very thick type of oil. And the key is that it kind of suspends it, but even with that, you guys, sometimes you'll pour the mica on and it'll separate if it's too much oil. So more mica, less